so much, Hugo, for inviting me and to the organizers for putting this together, and for all of you for being here. It's a bit strange to be talking about Palestine and Gaza right now. It's we're all carrying so much grief and so much rage around this. There is, of course, the kind of de-escalation of the intensive daily bombing, which is, of course, welcome. But it also means that the grief and rage of the last 2 years, we've had a moment for it to catch up with us. People are still pulling bodies out from under the rubble with their bare hands because the Israelis haven't allowed any of the heavy equipment in. They'd, of course, destroyed all of that equipment in the first month of the genocide. I mean, it's very emotional seeing our prisoners, our political captives, being liberated. But there's still over 8,000 of them that we know about in the Israeli dungeons, and thousands more that are fate unknown, specifically from the Gaza Strip. Israel's onslaught against the West Bank has intensified immeasurably, actually, in the last 2 years. The Israelis have historically been extremely adept at using things from US presidential elections to football World Cups to other atrocities it's committing, smoke screens for other things it's doing elsewhere. Palestinian citizens of 1948 Palestine, or Palestinian citizens of Israel, have also been facing massive land confiscation, massive scales of arrests and political imprisonment, because 1948 Palestine is considered Israel proper, and so therefore not considered something that human rights organizations, for instance, will monitor and really talk about. And ultimately the core of our struggle, which is the return of refugees like myself to the homes and lands that we and our parents and our grandparents were displaced from, remains somehow at the very end of the international agenda, despite the centrality of refugee return to international law. And while we're talking about international law, I think what the last 2 years have shown more than anything is that the international legal regime is not robust enough to protect. Not only to prevent, but even once the commission of the crime of genocide was just on in the field of vision of everybody who cared to look, it failed to stop it. The South African government's attempt to bring this to the International Court of Justice, for that to happen, required actually quite a bit of subterfuge on the part of the minister and her staff. And by any assessment for the International Court of Justice's decision-making to play out, we're not really going to hear anything before 2027. Right? This began, or this particular intensification of Israel's genocidal campaign against us of the last 80 years began 2 years ago, and we need to wait another 2 years before this court can even just make a determination on whether or not this was genocide. However, this is not really just about law. Right? This is ultimately, like all of the issues that we face, they are issues that concern power. The power to enact, the power to stop others from enacting. How do we build this power? How do we confront power? And on that level, we realize very clearly that this was not just Israel's war. Right? This is not just the Zionist project telling us what it said it was going to do from its inception in the 1880s and 1890s, which is to create a land for one exclusive kind of people at the expense of all of the people who already lived there. Right? And chose a piece of land that really does belong to all of humanity in so many ways, and has forever, as a crossroads between continents, as a place that is holy to so many. So to say this is only for this one kind of people and everybody else out at any cost has been the history of the Zionist project. That is the Zionist project. The expulsion of the indigenous population and its replacement by one kind of people defined under Israeli law as the Jewish people. Right? And even if that includes hundreds of thousands of Russian Orthodox folk who came after the dissolution of the Soviet Union and marked themselves down as Jewish, and are classified under Israeli law as Jewish nationals of the Israeli state, it's really not about religion. Right? This is a separate colony. It is a genocidal separate colony. And what this has shown us in terms of power is that this is a global story. Right? This is not just about one place. This is also not something that's just happening over there. what, if any careful analysis of the history of Israel from before its inception until tomorrow and the day after, is that this is an extremely frail body. The only reason it is able to do what it has done for the last 80 plus years is because of international support, not complicity, not aiding and abetting, participation and active support, to the tune of billions and billions and billions of dollars per year from the date of its inception and before. This miracle nation, startup nation, the greatest army, the greatest intelligence service, all the stuff they feed us on Hollywood and television or whatnot, is really all quite nonsense, right? If we want to learn one lesson from October 2nd, it's that a group of people who were living in a concentration camp for over a decade were able to break this greatest military in the world, using effectively homemade munitions. And the international community, the state system, has doubled down, right? Not a single state has really taken any meaningful action to hold Israel to account. 2 years into it, we started to get some support for members of Spanish and Italian society who were participating in flotillas as a kind of naval escort of one ship. That was basically as far as we got in terms of state activity, other than the rogue South African minister who brought this to the International Court of Justice. Nobody's managed to bring any food or water or aid in the middle of a forced famine and starvation that was happening in front of all of us. And it's also set a precedent, right? Some of you will remember about a year and a half ago, India and Pakistan looked like they might be going to some conflict over Kashmir. And hopefully the first thought in everybody's mind was, uh-oh, Israel set the precedent, what is India going to do in Kashmir? Because they're going to be able to get away with it. Right? Are they going to be able to carry out mass genocide in front of all of us and then say, well, you can't hold me to account. Israel did it and nobody lifted a finger. On what basis are you going to be hypocrites and lift a finger against me? We've been told, point blank effectively, that these regimes that we live under, I'm now talking about the British government and the American government and the German government and so on, would rather violate their own citizens' rights, would rather turn themselves into surveillance states, would rather violate their own constitutions to allow things like arms companies, like we heard this morning, to spy on students. Not even state surveillance systems and intelligence apparatuses, to allow private arms companies to spy on students at universities, then to stop a genocide. Let it sink in where we are right now as a globe. And so really this is what Palestine is, this struggle that we've been dealing with for the last 2 years is not something that's localized in Palestine. This is about the ascendancy of global fascism. And the sooner we reckon with that fact, the sooner we realize that the struggle for Palestine is not a struggle that's happening over there, it's a struggle that's happening right here. Every conversation we had this morning ties in very directly to this exact fact, that fascism is here. It's not coming, it's not on the way, it's not something we need to watch out for. It's here. It's this government, it's the Labour government, the government led by a party that's supposed to represent the British working class. And I think we need to point to the fact that there is a restructuring of the British working class towards turning the British working class into people who make weapons, into policemen, and into prison guards. Maybe there's a clue here somewhere, right? That in the last 10 years, there has really been this restructuring, this shift of trying to funnel the working class. Instead of protecting things like the productive industries that this country had before, to go into the production of munitions and arms and airplanes that are going to be used to kill people elsewhere, and perhaps not just elsewhere. So that the working class itself is fully tied up to the prison-industrial complex and the military-industrial complex. So it's the weaponization of unemployment and the weaponization of productive employment to buttress the intensification and the kind of rootedness of fascism in this society. And I think one of the things that we need to learn, and this comes up whenever I'm in a conversation where kind of human rights and the law and these sort of formal layer, liberal layer of the conversation is the focus, is that I think our liberal theories of change need to be rethought, right? And I will be the first to own up to the fact that for the last 25 years as a political organizer, my theory of change was that everybody is misinformed about Palestine. If only people knew more, then we can have a mass movement, and we would have people in the streets and people demanding different policies from their representatives. In the last 2 years, we saw exactly that. Who doesn't know about Palestine now? How many millions of people were in the street every single week? Every political organizer I know, pre-2023, their dream was millions of people in the streets every week. But that's how change happens. We got millions of people out in the street. There's still millions of people out in the street. And not just in London, or in Cardiff, or in Edinburgh, or in Birmingham. Globally, this is the largest mass movement in human history. We've broken all the records in terms of mass movements. And not only did nothing change, 2 months ago the British government announced that it was paying Israel £2 billion to get the Israeli Defense Forces to train British soldiers and police. They're upping the ante, they're upping the game into the genocide, into the mass movement, into the millions of people out into the streets. There's something we're not doing right? And this is not a self-flagellation. This is a we must take stock. Our theory of change, which is about informing people, and they will come together, and they will head out into the streets, and they will put pressure on our representative institutions, this is not doing it. If that was an effective theory of change, then December 2023, January 2024, the genocide would have stopped. And I'm not saying I have the answers, but I am saying that fascism has something to do with it, right? Fascism in the sense of a kind of authoritarian regimes, and what differentiates fascism from other types of authoritarianisms, do we know? It's that fascists win elections. That is the single most important difference between generally authoritarianism in general and fascism in particular. That fascism wins elections. Right? It's a populist type of authoritarianism. It has a support base, and a very large support base. And we have to contend with that, because what we're talking about is something closer to the realm of civil war, right? And I'm not saying there's going to be people out with guns fighting one another tomorrow in the streets of Cardiff, but I am saying that we need to clue in that this is no longer about winning the argument, this is no longer about convincing people. We do need to talk to people, we do need to kind of reel people back from the edge of the cliff, but we do need to adjust our theory of change. It's made evident, the old adage, scratch a liberal and a Nazi bleeds. Right? You know what I mean by that? These institutions, these frameworks that we're living under, are all fine and dandy in terms of the language of human rights and due process and the rule of law and all of this, but as soon as they find themselves under threat, we'll immediately remove the mask, and the fascist monster beneath, we start to see those fangs. Right? And that is literally the moment that we're living in right now. It's the unmasking of that liberal order and the appearance of those fangs, to the tune of hundreds of thousands of people dead. And so, I'll just end with this. I think Gaza's lesson to the world about freedom is the kind of thing where you use it or you lose it. And we have freedom still in this country. You have freedom. We're here, we're talking. I'm an immigrant. They can deport me tomorrow. Actually, they're deporting me quite soon. But the reality is we're able to have these conversations. We're able to hold placards and stand outside, right? Yes, they are arresting people, but they're sheepish as they do it. I mean, you all know all of this. But we still have the freedom to speak, we have the freedom to organize, we have the freedom to assemble, we have the freedom to develop our analysis, we have the freedom to hold people to account, we have the freedom to go and stop arms shipments and arms factories from sending those arms. We have all of these freedoms. They are still there, right? There are still courts that are able to overturn things. Pal Action won its last, the fact that the judicial review is going to go ahead. That happened yesterday or 2 days ago, right? There is still some of this here. Let's use it, or we're going to lose it. I'll stop with that.